You want your daughter's death to mean something, then stop pretending she mattered. That was the last thing Clint Rourke said to Marin before everything fractured. The storm, the hidden files, the night the floor beneath her cracked literally. She wasn't looking for revenge. She was just trying to breathe in a place where the air didn't hurt. But sometimes when you've lost everything, the forest becomes the only thing that listens. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. Marin rubbed her palms under the faucet, watching sap spiral down the drain. Her skin was raw, knuckles flushed where gloves should have been. The kitchen smelled of soap and pine, with a faint metallic tang she couldn't place. She pushed the window wider, breathing in early autumn. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk, whispering past the fire escape. The sky had sunk into that orange hour when shadows stretched long and blue. On the stove, eggs hissed in a dented pan. She buttered stale bread and set it beside the plate. The radio clicked and then off again. The voice felt too close. At the table, a photo frame leaned slightly. Her husband's arms circled their daughter, both mid-laugh. A corner of the glass was chipped. Moraine left it that way. 3 short knocks came. She didn't flinch, just wiped her hands with a rag and opened the door. A cardboard box waited at her feet, filled with crooked carrots and potatoes still dusted in earth. On top, a folded note in shaky cursive, "You should eat more. Thin people don't hold heat. Roscoe." She carried the box to the counter, murmuring thanks into the still air, though he was already gone. Dinner lingered. She set another plate, slid half the eggs onto it, and left the fork untouched. Her own bites were steady, almost ritual, until something in her chest went heavy. Later, she doused the lights, letting the room sink darker than silence. She stood at the window, arms folded, sweater collar drawn to her mouth. Beyond the trees, a faint orange flicker shifted. Not headlights' fire wavering behind some tarp or tent. Another night lit by something barely holding on. The wind threaded through the frame, lifting a strand of her hair. She let it drift. The city building hadn't changed, a flickering hall light, the stale reek of overused freshener. Marin paused at the community room door, smoothing her shirt over worn jeans. The collar had frayed the fabric, thinned at the elbows, but it was still the only thing that didn't look straight off the trail. A projector blinked blue. Bare walls and a dusty clock marked the space folding chairs scattered in uneven rows. Few people looked up. At the end, a man scrolled his phone with slow swipes. A woman in a pencil skirt tapped her pen against the table's edge. Marin set her folder down carefully and cleared her throat. "I'm proposing a restoration project," she said, voice even but tight. "The land east of Ridgepoint Avenue, what used to be Trailhead Access, has been unmanaged for nearly 4 years. It's become overrun with—" "That's outside your jurisdiction," a voice cut in. Clint Rourke. He didn't need to raise his tone. Leaning back, hands folded over his stomach, he looked like a man rewatching an old rerun. "You're not with the service anymore, Ms. Kepler. Why are we listening to a civilian lecture about forest health?" Her mouth stayed slightly open mid-word. Clint reached into his folder, sliding a stapled packet across the table, with deliberate slowness. "That's your resignation. You left. You don't get to rewrite history just because you're nostalgic." No one objected. The man with the phone kept scrolling. The woman with the pen didn't blink. Marin touched the papers. Cold shot through her fingertips. She didn't reread the letter. She knew every line, the uneven date she'd scrawled at the bottom. She nodded once, gathered her things, and walked out. The hallway hummed with the elevator whining above. She chose the stairs. Each step felt like a door closing behind her. The air was dry but not yet cold. That would come later, sharp and sudden. She lingered on the sidewalk until her phone buzzed. One new message. "Your account has been charged $27.50 for monthly maintenance. Current balance $14.99. The number blinked, then vanished. She slid the phone into her jacket pocket, her hand curling tight. By the time she reached the apartment, the sun had dipped low. Orange stripes cut through the blinds, dulling to gray. She left the lamp off, hung her coat, dropped her boots, and sat. From the drawer, she pulled a thin envelope, creased and ringed with an old coffee stain. The deed lay within cabin number 34, Gideon Trask's name stamped in all caps, impersonal. She brushed her thumb across the faded ink. She had never met Gideon. The envelope had arrived weeks earlier with no return address, only a clip note. "You'll know when it's time." She didn't believe in signs, but she couldn't keep breathing recycled air and pretending it was living. The suitcase groaned as she dragged it from under the bed. Zippers scraped against the frame. She packed without hesitation layers socks, a flashlight, the knife she hadn't touched since last winter, a can opener, the old Stanley thermos with its dented lid. Only once did she pause at the photo frame. She laid it face down in the bottom of the bag. It didn't need to see more. The door latched softly. She locked it, lingered with the key in her hand, fingers trembling, then steadied against the metal. A slip of paper clung to her boot in the hallway. She bent, read without blinking, final notice. Payment overdue. Eviction possible within 10 days. A neighbor's door creaked open, then shut. Maureen kept walking. By dawn, the path was already climbing into the hills. The slope sharpened without warning. Maureen shifted her weight boots, scraping loose gravel. Breath rose in faint clouds, dissolving before her collar. Her scarf had slipped, but she left it. The wind urged her on in sharp gusts, insistent, not violent, a reminder that nothing here was soft. When the ridge leveled, Marin stopped. Through the trees, a roofline surfaced, half hidden, shadowed, nearly swallowed by the fading light. She didn't go to it yet. A narrower path pulled her left, once maintained by the ranger service years ago. Though the brush had reclaimed much of it, the curve still guided her steps. Minutes later, a squat station appeared. Green trim, peeling gutter, rust-streaked door chain, shut one side window, cracked along the sill. Marin lingered, shifting her weight from one boot to the other. A wooden sign hung above the steps, Gunnison District, Field Post 12. Half the paint had flaked away. The wind rattled the eaves, and she turned from the place without touching the door. By dusk, the light had gone metallic blue. She found a clearing between two aspen groves and began setting up camp. Fingers stiff, even the simplest tasks, sliding poles, tightening tarp lines, dragged longer than memory allowed. Uneven ground resisted every stake, as if refusing to be claimed. Through the branches, the cabin's edge remained in view, waiting. She told herself it might be unsafe, rotting, crawling with mold or mice. A quieter truth pressed harder. She wasn't ready. The tent shivered when she zipped the flap and crawled in. Breath warmed the space quickly, but her toes stayed numb. Dinner was silent, jerky, half an apple, one mouthful of water. She let linger before swallowing. Lying down, she curled around her pack like an old companion. A hand slipped beneath the clothes, finding the familiar frame. Her thumb traced the glass lightly, only enough to know it was still there. Somewhere past midnight, a sound roused her. Not wind, not shifting branches. A crunch close to singular. A pause. Then another. Her fingers closed around the knife beneath her pillow. She stayed still, counting uneven heartbeats. No more noise came, but wakefulness held until the black sky bruised gray. At first light, she unzipped the tent and crouched in the doorway, breath rising in uneven trails. The forest waited quiet, listening. She stepped out and scanned the earth. Tracks marked the soil behind camp. Deep, deliberate. Wider than her hand. They circled the tent, once then trailed into the trees. Crouching by the clearest print, she read its intention. Not coyote, not deer. Too careful, too exact. The prints hadn't wandered. They'd watched. No panic rose, only study. Marin noted spacing direction, then turned toward the fire pit. Hands moved with old rhythm pot from the bag the last of her water poured in. The flame hesitated with the damp wood. When it caught, it crackled once, then steadied low. Cross-legged on frozen dirt, she watched smoke climb in a thin line. Beyond the cabin, waited in silence. The door yielded at her push, not stiff but reluctant, as if left so on purpose. Marine crossed the threshold, nerves taut, one hand curled around the pepper spray hidden in her sleeve. The air should have been stale months of shuttered windows, but faint traces of wood smoke and dried sage lingered. The room met her, not as a ruin, but as a place maintained. Dust only freckled the sill. The floorboards were swept. An enamel kettle sat scrubbed clean. Pans hung aligned above the stove, polished to dull silver. Along the far wall, a cot waited under a folded wool blanket, its corners tucked with military precision. No debris, no animals, no neglect. This cabin had not been abandoned. Moran moved heel to toe, studying details without touch. The space held memory but not hers, and that difference pressed against her ribs like a question unspoken. On the table lay a single sheet, handwritten, unsigned. Don't go into the cellar unless you're ready. The letter stood clean, upright, someone who wanted to be read. Her gaze swept the corners again. No photographs, no coats on hooks. Food tins lined up but unopened. A lantern, matches, then the notebook. Leather cracked pages left open mid-thought. Sketches filled them. Stone ridges, erosion arrows, notes on soil and mineral seams. Precise, functional, the work of someone who knew the land. She turned one page, then another, pausing on a diagram of layered rock, marked with symbols half remembered from ranger school. Her breath caught. Who had been here and why leave so carefully? Marin closed the journal and set it back. She ignored the note and the cellar door, now a dark square at the room's rear, half covered by a rug. Light filtered through the wooden slats striping the floor. Her shadow cut across, shifting with the sun. Silence pressed against her, dense and waiting. She boiled snowmelt on the stove. The flame caught fast, as if the place had waited for her return, though she'd never set foot here before. On the cot, she drank slowly. The first swallow scalded her tongue, but the bitterness steadied more than the heat. Night came hard. The last glow drained from the windows like ink in water. Cold slipped through the seams, crawling into her bones. She pulled on another pair of socks curled in her bag and watched the ceiling corners vanish into dark. The blanket smelled faintly of smoke and citrus soap, clean recent. She meant to rest, but the unnatural quiet tugged at her nerves. Even the stove's ticks felt too evenly rehearsed. Near midnight, wind curled under the door, carrying pine and something feral. Her eyes opened. Fingers closed on the knife beneath her pillow. Then came a hush, neither wind nor branches. At the window, a flicker, two eyes catching the moonlight in amber flash. Watching, no outline, no face, and then gone. She lay still, breath shallow, ears straining. Nothing moved. The window sank back into shadow. She neither rose nor spoke. On the table, the journal stayed where it was. The note waited. Morning cracked through the slats and thin gold lines, warming the overnight dust. Maureen sat on the cot's edge, Lace's half-tied eyes fixed on the window. No tracks, no eyes. Only trees swaying in a rhythm too slow to trust. Her breath clouded the cold air. She pulled on her jacket, slung the satchel, and left without breakfast. The road twisted through gravel and old snow too narrow for tourists. Between the second bend and a leaning pole, with a nest wedged at its top, a gas station appeared squat, tilting west, as if the wind had nudged it for years. She stamped her boots at the door and stepped into a haze of burnt coffee and freezer air. The clerk barely glanced up. A television muttered sports scores in the corner. Fuel matches dried soup, cheap batteries. She gathered them quick. At the register, a flickering neon arrow drew her eye to a metal door. Above it, faded paint read, "Phone booth. Emergency use only." Her gut tightened. Cash down, no questions. As she passed, her fingers hovered near the receiver. The booth's silence felt strange, thick as if sound had nowhere to go. She almost walked on. Then the phone rang. Not a ringtone. A deep mechanical burring from another decade. No caller ID. No light. Only the sound insistent. She lifted the receiver slowly. "Hello." A pause, then a man's voice, calm and low. "You've been at the cabin." Her mouth dried. She said nothing. "Good. Stay alert. The land keeps its own secrets." Click. A dial tone buzzed flat and gray. For a beat, she stood frozen, heart hammering. The clerk hadn't moved. A truck passed, tires crunching slush. The world carried on unchanged. She walked back faster than she'd left. At the cabin, Moran locked the door and checked the windows twice. The notebook still sat on the table. The cot lay undisturbed. No smoke. No trace of anyone. Yet unease thickened. A warped plank groaned under her step. She had noticed it the day before, but left it. Now crouching, she pried it loose. The board lifted with a splintered sigh. Tucked between the beams lay a bundle wrapped in oilskin. Maureen pulled it free, set it on the table. The covering peeled with a sticky rip fabric fused by dust and damp. Maps spread across the table, not tourist brochures, but geological surveys. Tunnels marked. Elevation scans. Photographs, grainy and black and white trees, circled in red ridgelines, coated with symbols from her bureau days. At the top of one sheet, Zone K, sample confirmed grade A ore. Access must remain limited. No unauthorized entries. Another page listed coordinates. She knew the hill east of her first night's camp. Her pulse surged. These weren't public records nor even internal standards. Whoever compiled them knew the land intimately, and now the evidence lay exposed before her. The bundle was wrapped again, carried to the back room, locked into the chest, bolted to the wall. The key stuck but turned, and she slid it into her sock instead of her pocket. Turning back toward the front, she stopped short. A wet imprint gleamed on the boards near the threshold. Human press deep, faintly shining in the dim light. No step had sounded, no lock had shifted, no knock had come, and still the sky held dry. Then the storm broke. Water came hard, tumbling through the canopy in fat drops that slapped against Marin's hood. She pulled her jacket higher and leaned into the wind boots, squelching along a path that barely existed anymore. A drowned ribbon of moss winding deeper through the trees. The old map had marked a structure here, southeast of the cabin. She remembered it dimly from ranger training years ago, a name scribbled on an outdated survey field bunkhouse. Inactive. No one had spoken of it since. The trail narrowed, curving around fallen logs and alder thickets. Branches snagged her sleeves. Wet leaves clung to her jeans. Pine and soaked bark thickened the atmosphere. Each exhale left a white plume that dissolved too quickly. Through thinning trees, a squat, sagging bunkhouse appeared at last, moss crawling its walls as if time itself were swallowing it whole. Boards nailed across the front window, a rusted chimney leaning to one side. Marin approached with care, boots light on slick ground, the forest hushed beneath the hiss of rain. The door yielded to a shove, groaning as though unused for years. Shadows pooled within. Neglect lingered, sweat mildew rodent. Bunk beds slumped along the far wall, mattresses split and sunken. A metal locker gaped open. In the corner, a stove rusted through at the base. Her flashlight caught glass glints along one wall. Framed photos. She brushed cobwebs aside. Most images had warped faces, swollen by moisture, corners curled, but one remained clear. A tall man in his 60s stood with a hand resting on the shoulder of a girl. Long hair pulled back, flannel sleeves rolled, a thin smile caught just before it vanished. Marine's pulse stumbled. That face, the chin's slope, the eyes. It could have been her 5 years ago. Beneath a caption, scrawled in faint marker, Trask and MK 2015. Turning the frame, she found a strip of masking tape clinging to the back, 2 words inked across it. She knows. The building creaked with the shifting wind. She stared a moment longer, then slid the photo free and tucked it into her jacket. Fingers shook, not from the cold. Trask had known her before his name reached her ears, before she ever stepped into his cabin, even before she left the service. The return hike dragged longer than it should have. Mud clutched at her boots' calves, burning as fog rolled low and swallowed the trees. When the cabin came into view, it lay wrapped in silence, too complete. Marine halted at the clearing's edge. Nothing stirred, nothing spoke, yet the stillness felt wrong. Keys ready, she climbed the porch. The lock yielded without resistance, though she remembered turning it. Inside the room looked unchanged, cot stove pack in the corner. Yet on the table a sheet lay pinned beneath a stone. No envelope, no signature. If you don't protect it, they'll erase everything. The words stood in block letters, sharp and fresh. She pulled open the drawer, lifted the old satellite phone, and dialed Grand Mesa, the only ranger station with a working line. 1 ring, 2, then nothing. No message, no tone, just absence. The phone settled back into place as if it might break. The walls pressed closer, shadows thickening. Her light swept toward the large map above the stove, the same one studied every day. Contours of rivers, ridges, trails spread familiar across the page, all but for a new addition, a red circle cut into her section of forest. The ink looked recent, the same blocky hand, her land. She stepped back, bumping the table. Water hammered the roof, a rhythm like something shifting its weight above. The sky darkened to bruised metal, though the storm hadn't yet broken. Marin moved from window to window, testing latches, fingertips brushing for weakness. The cabin sighed under the wind's push, not protesting, but remembering worse. A chair wedged beneath the knob, she leaned against it while candlelight wavered. Beyond the walls, the forest had begun to argue, branches, thrashing leaves shivering like wet dogs. Then it came, not thunder, not yet, but a low, guttural sound pulled from the throat of the trees. Unnatural. Her steps crept toward the back. Silence. Then again, 3 deliberate scrapes against the rear door nails, dragging slow across the wood. Not frantic, not animal. Intentional. Her hand touched the bolt, then froze. A dark smear stretched across the base of the door, fresh and glistening in candlelight. Shaking, she turned back to the table, opened the journal. Pages fluttered in the draft from the cracked window. One tore free and drifted down a postcard yellowed at the edges. Typed in stark ink. They come when it rains. Don't let them take the anchor. Anchor. She read it twice, pressing the card flat as if weight could force an answer. Shutters rattled. Shoving the paper aside, she reached beneath the hearth plank where Gideon Trask's folder lay hidden. Parcel C, Cabin 34. Her name printed in clean legal letters, stamped Rare Earth Yield, Type A. Beneath a line in the same slanted hand, they won't stop. Not until they get what they came for. A chill slid down her spine. Wind screamed through the pines. Thunder cracked close enough to rattle the rafters. A candle flared near the sink, guttered, then died, leaving the room in sudden dark. Marin snapped on her flashlight. The beam cut across the cabin, then froze, on 2 faint points of light beyond the glass. Too high for a fox, too steady for fireflies. They didn't blink, didn't sway, only hovered. She ducked, killed the light. Breath stalled, heart hammering like a drum. Rain finally burst, pattering first, then surging in sheets. The roof groaned as water rushed the gutters, whispering low and urgent. Marin crouched by the fireplace, poker clenched, and listened. Then came the thud. From beneath the cabin. Ear pressed to the board's silence. Then another blow harder, wood against wood directly below. Each vibration rose through her toes, every creak a phantom footstep. Forcing her breath steady, she moved to the wall where the map hung. The flashlight flickered twice before holding. Lines sprawled familiar, except for one more mark, a neat red circle enclosing the area east of the cabin above it, scrawled, Her Land. Her stomach twisted. A new sound snapped her around. The stove. Metal scraped against wood. The beam lifted. A thin trail of water glistened across the floor, inching from the door toward the stove, where shadows pooled deepest. At its end lay a footprint. Bare. Fresh. The flashlight trembled in her hands, its narrow beam slicing into the black below the open hatch. Air rose from the depths, damp and ancient, tinged with the sourness of wet stone left to rot. The stairs had creaked recently, not long ago. She leaned forward, the light catching a single print halfway down, left foot bare, water, still pooled in the arch. Marine blinked hard, then backed away. She let the hatch drop, the clap of wood against wood final. Breath hitched as she dragged a chair across the floor, wedging it tight over the seams, then topped it with the heaviest thing in reach, an iron pot. As if that might matter. The wind no longer brushed the trees, but shoved them, a deep groan, echoing through the beams, as though the forest leaned closer to listen. Rain quickened, tapping first like 1,000 fingernails, then pounding harder. A gust tore one shutter loose. It clapped against the wall, then slammed shut again. Rigid, she scanned the corners. Each breath came short and sharp. At the counter, she tugged open the drawer with the stubborn latch and pulled free the black case. Fingers clumsy, she unclipped the lock. A pistol lay dull in the flashlights, flicker rubber bullets, non-lethal or supposed to be. She hadn't held one in years. Cartridges slid in one by one. She tried to steady her hands, but they shook. The final snap of the slide settling back brought an unnatural silence. Thunder cracked somewhere beyond. Lowering herself to the ground, she pressed against the wall. Cold seeped through her sweater. She didn't care. From there, she watched the door's base window, rims edged in dark. Lightning flashed white. Each burst made her flinch. She should have moved, done something. Instead, her mind unraveled. Floodwater. Lily's scream swallowed by the river's roar. Fingers slipping. The memory hit like a wave to the chest. She buried her face in her sleeve and bit down hard. A mechanical rumble rose in the distance, different from thunder, deliberate. Crawling to the side window, she peered through a narrow slit in the curtain. A truck. Black or maybe dark red, rolling slow along the mudded trail, headlights flickering as branches swayed. No one should have known she was here. She backed away, killed the light. The vehicle stopped 15 feet from the porch, engine idling. The door opened. Clint Rourke stepped out as if he'd been here 100 times. No umbrella. No hesitation. Rain soaked his jacket in seconds, yet he didn't flinch. He walked the short path to the porch. Didn't knock. Didn't pause. leaned toward the window, eyes scanning the dark interior, searching, calculating. Storm-dimmed light gave him nothing. Still, he lingered too long. Finally, he turned. She risked a glance. He crouched at the front steps, setting down a small black bag already soaked through. No note, no explanation. Back at the truck, he never once looked over his shoulder. Brake lights flared, then dimmed as the vehicle vanished into forest. Rain hammered the roof like drumfire wind, clawing at every seam of the old frame. Marin stayed on the floor, pistol tight in her hand. And on the porch, the bag waited. Morning hadn't yet burned through mist when she stepped out. Moisture clung to the railing like sweat on cold skin. The nylon bag sat on the top step, swollen from the storm zipper, rusted but intact. She stared at it a long while before lifting it, as if weight alone might reveal trap or offering. A flash drive sat in a cracked case beside a folded photograph, wrapped in wax paper and a slip of lined paper. The handwriting looked rushed ink, smudged where rain had touched it. This is the last time. Marin spread the photo beneath the lamp. Two men stood before a cabin, Trask in flannel grin, never touching his eyes, and beside him, Clint Rourke. Gideon's hand rested on Clint's shoulder, a gesture that could mean trust or warning. She pushed the drive into her old laptop, the fan-grown screen stuttering before a folder opened. A letter, survey maps marked in red, an image, her own face. A profile filled the monitor, a protest photo from years ago stamped Vos Marin, flagged under Eco 19. Notes marched beneath emotional reactivity, child deceased, high risk of defiance usable as leverage, isolated financially strained ideal target. A bitter taste rose in her throat. Knees pressed against the table as the truth hardened. She hadn't been chosen for expertise or for her bond with the forest. She had been positioned, a decoy. The cabin creaked. Somewhere behind her, the floor shifted under the weight of wind or memory. Ignoring it, she opened the map file, high-resolution scans overlaid with mining data. Red and orange marks scattered across ridgelines. One point blinked faintly, Zone 7. She didn't want to know what it meant. The next page carried an internal memo, unauthorized mineral extraction site confirmed within Gunnison Reserve borders. Operation must remain untraceable. Noise complaints sightings to be neutralized immediately. Another file opened without her clicking. A recording. Gideon's voice grainy, exhausted. They think I'm gone already. They're not wrong. But if she finds this Marin, if you're listening, don't trust Clint. Don't trust anyone who tells you to wait. She slammed the laptop shut. The clap of plastic rang too loud. Her lungs clawed for air. Then the phone rang. Old rotary, forgotten until now. Its shrillness sliced her spine with ice. She lifted the receiver. Silence. Then a woman's voice, calm, careful if you speak it, said you won't be the only one who dies. Click. No number. No dial tone. Marin stayed with the dead phone pressed to her ear, the forest beyond the window swaying as though disinterested. No birds. Only wind dragging across the roof like nails on canvas. She stuffed the drive into her pack, then the papers, the photo. A compact pistol she had never fired. Folding knife, one jacket, 2 protein bars, a full canteen. From the duffel's hem, she tugged out the hidden blade and slipped it into her boot. Her hands trembled, but the motions came sharp, decisive. Passing the notebook on the desk, she paused, one hand on the corner. Thought about reading more, about burning it. Did neither. At the door, she zipped the pack, slowly listening, not for footsteps, but for hesitation. None came. She stepped through, locked the door, then unlocked it again. Pointless. The trees opened like ribs as she descended the ridge. Earth squelched beneath her boots, each a step a soft warning. Somewhere behind her, not close but not far, either something snapped. Not a twig. A choice. Marin kept walking. Twilight bled through the treetops like smoke, the last warmth draining from the sky as she pressed forward. Her boots struck uneven stone with urgency packs swaying hard against her shoulders with every rushed step. She had passed the trailhead marker 15 minutes ago, half buried under moss, but the way down the mountain lived in her memory. The air thinned near the rockfall. Breath rasped in her throat as she rounded a bend and found the gully a split where a slide years ago had torn a wound into the earth. Jagged stone jutted upward, soil brittle beneath her soles. Fingers brushed tree trunks for balance along the slope, the same slope where she and Lena once pitched a tent under white pines. Late summer then, clear sky, campfire, popcorn and foil over open flame. Now the light sank to bruised purple. Shadows pooled faster than her eyes could adjust. Her foot slipped. One boot skidded on a smooth stone, her ankle twisted sideways. The pack dragged her weight forward. She fell hard-skinned, her knee scraped her palms and rolled twice before thudding against a ledge just short of the deeper drop. Air left her in a cracked wheeze. Pain bloomed up her leg like ink in water. She pushed herself upright slowly, fingers trembling as she peeled back the torn fabric at her shin. Blood welled beneath an angry scrape, and below that the old scar faded but unmistakable. A long curve slicing from calf to knee. The one from the crash. The one from the day Lena died. A low sound crawled out of her. Raw. Wordless. Then came the words jagged as gravel. Why wasn't it me? Her voice didn't echo. The woods took it in and held it like breath. Tears burned her eyes. She blinked hard, furious with herself for letting them come. From the side pouch of her pack, she pulled the photograph. The frame's corner had cracked from the fall, but the glass was intact. She wiped the dust off with her sleeve, holding it up to what little light remained. Lena was mid-laugh in the picture arms thrown around her mother's neck. That last summer, their last hike, freckles scattered like tiny sunbursts across her cheeks' teeth, still uneven from baby molars. Maren hadn't faced the photo since the burial. Not properly, not without grief's thick glass between them. Above a branch creaked pressure, not wind. Her head snapped up. Steps crunched on wet ground. A shape emerged from the slope, dark jacket, soaked hood paste, deliberate. Instinct pulled her hand toward the knife, but she froze when the woman spoke. "You're bleeding." The hood fell back. High cheekbones, olive skin pulled taut with fatigue, eyes too sharp to be harmless. A sidearm holstered at the hip, but hands raised, palms open. The voice from the phone, now with a face. "I'm Jade Connery," she said, no handshake offered. "I worked with Gideon." The name struck like a reflex. "You're the one who called," Maren's voice rasped. A slow nod. "You were never supposed to be here alone." A bitter laugh escaped. "Yeah, well, alone's sort of my thing." "I know." Jade crouched near the edge of the trail, glancing at the rocks below. 5 feet further and you wouldn't be talking to me." Maren said nothing. Her body trembled not from cold, but from holding too much for too long. A wrapped bandage landed gently in her lap. "You'll need that," Jade murmured. The words pressed heavier than the cloth itself. "I'm not part of this," she whispered. Yes came quietly. "You are, and you were marked long before you knew it." Jade straightened, scanning the trees. "They've burned every file, shut down every contact. Gideon was the last one keeping this alive. Now it's you." Wind shifted. Pine needles hissed like whispers. "If you run," Jade said evenly, "everything he died for gets buried with you." The bandage crumpled in Maren's fist. Her knees screamed as she pushed upright, pain slicing down her leg. They didn't meet eyes. They just walked. The trail forked ahead, silence stretching between them. Jade knelt at the floorboards, palm pressed, flat, counting panels under her breath. Maren crouched close, flashlight beam skating over worn planks. A draft seeped up from below, carrying damp metallic chill. "Here," Jade muttered, sliding a flat blade beneath the third slat from the hearth. Wood creaked as it lifted, revealing a narrow gap yawning into black. Barely wide enough for a person to descend sideways. Maren swallowed. "You've been down there?" Jade shook her head. "I only knew it existed. Gideon never showed me." She adjusted the strap of her headlamp and eased herself into the hole boots, finding the old iron rungs bolted to the wall. Maren followed, breath tight in her chest. The air grew colder with each step, the smell of earth and old paper rising. At the bottom, a dirt floor stretched beneath a low ceiling. Shelves lined the stone walls built from unfinished pine boards, sagging slightly under the weight of metal boxes and dusty binders. A generator hummed in the corner, small, silent, battery-powered, enough to keep the room just alive. Jade flipped a switch. Soft yellow bulbs blinked on, revealing a desk in the center covered in cables. Hard drives folders arranged with almost obsessive care. "Jesus," Maren whispered. "He built this." "Himself," Jade said nothing, stepping forward to lift the lid of a black Pelican case. Hard drives lay stacked in rows, each labeled with dates spanning the past decade, some more recent. One folder bore Marine's name. "Go ahead," Jade murmured. Hesitation slowed Marine's fingers as she opened it. Maps, survey logs, voice memos transcribed line by line, Gideon's handwriting, filling the margins with revisions, underlined sharp corrections. Another folder slid free, thicker stock, faint government seal in the corner. A transfer of land rights, dated 6 months ago, signed by Gideon Trask, granting her full ownership of the cabin and the surrounding 160 acres. Her throat closed. "I didn't agree to this," she rasped. "He didn't need your agreement," Jade replied. "He needed a safeguard. Someone no one would suspect. Someone carrying enough guilt to hide, but enough spine to act when it mattered." Turning from the files, Moran leaned against the table, breath-shallow fingertips brushing cool metal. "He used me." "No, he trusted you," Jade countered. "There's a difference." Silence thickened. Then Jade moved to the corner and cracked open another case. Cassette tapes filled the tray, each labeled by date and initials. She picked one, slid it into a small player. Clint's voice poured out, confident, unhurried. "We'll file the permits through the Shell Corporation. They'll never trace it. And if Trask keeps resisting, well, he's one man in the woods. Men like him go missing all the time." Jade stopped the tape. Marin didn't move, jaw-locked. "We can go public," she said. "We could," Jade answered, powering off the recorder. But Clint already filed his permits. 14 days and his company gets final approval. After that, bulldozers. Blasting charges, strip mining. Marin shook her head. "There has to be a way to stop it." "There is. But not through a press release. This is local politics, good old boy networks, deals made in back rooms. So we burn it down." Her tone carried more edge than humor. "We expose it from within. Force it into the open. Make denial impossible." Something shifted overhead, not the usual creak of settling timber, but the heavier groan of weight. Both froze. A crunch followed. Then a hiss, sharp as release pressure. The front door blew inward with a controlled blast. Dust rained from the ceiling. Marin lunged to the wall and killed the power. Darkness smothered the room. Jade motioned sharply, essentials only. Marin shoved folders into her pack, movements, mechanical. Tapes, hard drives. The voice in her head, "Go, now." Bootsteps echoed above, slow, methodical. 2 pairs, maybe 3. Heavy tread, no words. They had come for what was hidden, and they hadn't knocked. The floorboards groaned overhead, measured deliberate steps. Marin held her breath as dust sifted down in soft trails, each footfall shaking loose the weight of years. "They're here," Jade mouthed. 2 distinct sets of boots circled the living room, one pacing quick, the other dragging heavier. A chair clattered across the floor. A voice barked, "Clear the kitchen." Another answered with a grunt. Drawers slammed, glass shattered, then a boot hammered the hallway door. "We know someone's down there," the first voice called. Male, East Texas drawl. Too calm. Jade flicked her flashlight, once beam catching the mouth of a narrow tunnel behind them. A passage cut through rock and lined with plastic, sheeting an escape Gideon had carved long ago. Marin clutched the folder tight against her chest, heart galloping. A faint rattling came from her pack. She shifted to silence it, but a single paper slipped free, one of the topographic maps. It fluttered to the dirt landing, half folded. Jade's eyes widened. But before either could retrieve it, the floor above them split with the sound of a rifle stock smashing through old boards. "No time." Jade whispered, "Move." They crawled into the tunnel, narrow enough to force a stoop. Marin kept glancing back at the faint light spilling from the hatch. The map still lay on the ground, too far to grab. A boot appeared at the hole above. She turned and ran. The passage sloped downward, curving behind the cabin toward the old root cellar. Water pooled at the lowest bend, soaking through her jeans. Behind them, boots dropped into the crawl space. "Faster," Jade hissed. Air grew tighter with every stride, walls pressing closer. Near the end, Jade's foot caught on a root. She slipped, hard arm twisting beneath her. A muffled snap. She stifled a cry, teeth buried in her forearm. Marin dropped to her knees, dragging her toward the exit. Lungs screamed, iron on her tongue. No thought, no hesitation, she stayed. Above, footsteps split, one set pounding the tunnel, the other pacing the cabin. She braced against the trapdoor and pushed a crack open. The backwoods waited, damp underbrush, moonlight veiled by clouds. No voices, no lights. Marin slipped out first to scan the clearing, then pulled Jade through. The other woman leaned, heavy breath, ragged. Shoulder, she gasped. Out of socket. A sharp nod. Marin hoisted her arm over her own shoulder, and they staggered into the trees. Brambles clawed their ankles. A squirrel darted across the trail, gone in a blink. Somewhere behind, a curse ripped the night. Then a radio crackled Clint's drawl, carrying clear, "Don't fire. Bring her in alive." The forest held too still. They pressed forward. A beam skimmed the pines like a ghost sigh. Ducking beneath a fallen log, they breathed in ragged bursts. Jade's teeth clenched, sweat slick across her brow. "You should leave me," she whispered. Marin shook her head. Not happening. For the first time, her steps weren't just about escape. This was resistance. Muscles burned from weight in the old wound in her leg, but she kept moving. Headlights crept over the ridge like predators' eyes. A black truck idled, then eased onto the trail. A voice on the radio closer, now south perimeter. "We've got movement." Marin yanked Jade into a ditch choked with thistle and wet leaves. Headlights swept overhead, cutting white across their faces, then slid on. Silence. 10 seconds. 20. The truck didn't return. "We need higher ground," Marin whispered. Jade gave the faintest nod. The radio flared again, Clint's voice lower. "This time, I want eyes on the cabin and the tunnels. She has the originals." Thunder rumbled. Wind bowed the trees. Clint again, flat and final. No more warnings. A twig snapped less than 20 feet behind. A flashlight sparked on. Marin pulled Jade deeper into the ditch, counting the approaching steps. 3, 4. She didn't know what would follow, only that there was no trail leading back. And someone knew they were still breathing. The cave's mouth yawned behind scrub and loose shale, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Marin half-carried, half-dragged Jade across the damp stone. Moisture dripped from the ceiling, tiny pools mirroring the flicker of her headlamp. She lowered Jade onto a folded blanket palm, brushing her forehead. Too hot. Burning. Jade stirred, eyes glazed. "I'm fine," she mumbled. "No," Marin said. "You're not." The pack scraped closer. Marin wrapped Jade in her coat, then added her own. Silence pressed close, broken only by wind soughing at the cave's mouth. Drawing her knees up, fingers brushed the photo folded in her jacket, creased edges curling. She hadn't looked since the fall. She did now. Lena's handwriting sprawled across the bottom in smudged blue ink. "Mom, you're stronger than you think." Not advice, but a dare, one whispered by a child who had seen more than she ever admitted. For a long moment, Marin stared. Jade's breathing shifted. A scratchy whisper broke through. "I can't carry it anymore. You'll have to finish." What a laminated card slipped from her pocket into Marin's palm. "Auth key. Bureau's backdoor drop. It bypasses local servers." Marin blinked, clutching it. "It's real time," Jade muttered. "Once it starts, no one can stop it." The card's edge cut into her skin. She nodded once, glanced at Jade's half-shut eyes, the split lip, then turned to her pack. The old radio transmitter emerged, knob still marked with Gideon's Sharpie scrawl. Antenna extended. A red light blinked. Click. Static. The flash drive slid home. Hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. Past Jade coughed, rasped 9 characters. Marin typed. Connection acquired. Data began to flow, maps, recordings, transfer deeds, surveillance reports, even her own file. Every packet hammered Clint's coffin shut. The bar climbed. 10, 30, 40. Jade murmured. "He'll know as soon as the server pings." Marin didn't stop. Wind gathered at the cave mouth, dragging grit across her boots. 60, 70. "You can still run," Jade whispered. No reply. Static pitched high, then leveled. Somewhere out there, Clint bent over a scanner truck lodge. It didn't matter. He knew. The radio cracked, voice warped with fury. "They're broadcasting. Cut the feed now. 80, 90. Marin hunched over the transmitter, shielding it with her body. Storm winds howled through the cliffs. Jade tried to rise, collapsed again. "You can't let him destroy that land," she rasped. "It's proof." 98. Engines growled below. Tires scraped rock. 99. Marin's heart slammed. She reached complete. A green light blinked, held, vanished. She yanked the drive folded, the antenna jammed it all into her pack. White glare swept the cave's entrance. Mechanical, unforgiving. Her hand pressed flat to cold stone. She waited. Clint's voice tore the night from below. They're up there. Go, but the wind didn't turn back. Dirt clung to her palms, gritty and wet. Marin staggered forward, mud up to her knees, blood trickling from a temple cut. Breath came in gasps. Every rib ached. The device wrapped tight against her chest buzzed warm like a heartbeat still broadcasting. The ridge opened path, splitting one toward the highway, the other toward the ranger cabin's ruins. She barely reached the fork before headlights slashed the mist. Tires crunched. A black SUV rolled to a stop. No sirens, no rush, just quiet control. Clint stepped out first, no jacket this time, just a button-up rolled at the sleeves, white against the encroaching gray. Rain darkened his collar, his boots sunk slightly into the earth. In one hand he carried nothing more than a file folder, swollen yellowed at the corners. In the other he held up a palm empty. No need to run anymore. Marin, he called. She didn't move. He walked closer, slow, deliberate. The folder flapped gently in the breeze. I brought something for you, he said, voice too even. You remember this? He opened the file just enough for her to glimpse a familiar watermark. Denver Medical, Neurology. She didn't look away, though her fingers curled tighter around the edge of the transmitter. Rain slicked her knuckles. Clint gave a slow, sorrowful shake of his head, the kind people gave when pretending to mourn something they never truly cared for. All those years trying, all those hospital visits, and in the end, what did it change? He let the folder fall open. X-rays spilled across the grass. A photo of Lena at age 6, wires taped to her scalp. You want this to be her legacy, he asked softly. Another woman screaming into the void. Marin blinked. Once. The rain blurred his face. She said nothing, just reached behind her and flicked the switch on the side of the transmitter. The device beeped. Live. Satellite uplink established. Clint's mouth twitched. You think they'll listen to you? His voice dropped. You think they'll care? You think a grieving mother with a record of disciplinary leave and a list of flag therapy sessions is their hero? She met his eyes for the first time and didn't flinch. Not when the first red light blinked on the camera. Not when the soft whirring signaled the stream was climbing. Not even when he stepped closer. You're already the villain in this story, he whispered. All I'm doing is letting the world see it. Marin tilted her head, then let them. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles right before something breaks. Then he lunged. He went for the device, arms wide, eyes wild. She spun away, but he caught her shoulder. They crashed to the ground together, mud splashing, knees scraping. The transmitter tumbled a few feet off. She clawed toward it, fingers barely brushing the edge before his weight crushed down again. You don't get to win, he hissed into her ear. Above them, somewhere in the clouds, rotors churned. A second SUV screeched to a halt up the hill. This time the blue flicker of sirens sliced through the trees. Voices shouted commands sharp practiced. Clint froze. Marin shoved him off and grabbed the device. The screen still glowed. Connection active. Too late now. They both knew it. Clint sat back, drenched and dazed. You don't even know what you've started, he muttered. She gave no reply. None was needed. Federal agents stormed past, boots pounding earth weapons, lifted eyes sweeping for threats. One knelt to check her injuries. She let them. Her arms hung slack at her sides. Jade's voice rasped from a radio clipped to a vest, weak but alive, target identified. Stream secure. Witness in custody. Floodlights locked Clint in a pale circle. Marin rose. Not proud, not victorious, just blank shoulders slumped. She was alive. That was all. Sirens ebbed. The forest fell still. No one saw her fall. No one saw the moment she chose to rise again. Rain tapped a quiet rhythm on the tin roof of the ranger station. Eaves turned to a steady drum line. Marine leaned over the desk, pencil hovering above a fresh journal. The forest exhaled through the open window. Branches bowed with water, leaves glistening in muted light. She hadn't left. Jade's call, rough pleading, had urged come back. But Marine stayed claiming the station as ground zero for recovery data salvage and the slow work that mattered more than escape. The storm had broken earlier in the week, leaving gravel roads slick, the air sharp with memory. The room carried the mingled scent of damp wood, old maps, and fresh rain. Beyond the cracked pane, sugar maples stood skeletal, trembling under drizzle. She set her draft aside and pulled open the drawer. A spiral notebook weighted cover, frayed corners curled. Fingers traced the worn edge before lifting it free. On one faded page, Lena's childish loops declared, "Mom, you are stronger than you think." That line had haunted her, bearing truth and accusation both. Marin inhaled and pressed pen to page, writing deliberately in steady strokes. Wind learns to bow. Rain learns to heal. I will stand. I will remain. Ink pooled slightly where the paper crinkled with moisture. She let the words hang. Across the desk sat the photograph, her Lena, her husband, faces bold against summer light. No longer hidden, no longer face down. She placed the little stone from the creek, the one Lena chased across smooth river rocks, on the corner of that frame. It seemed right to anchor something in memory, something she would protect. Another knock. Soft tap tap. A young ranger, muddy boots and earnest eyes, opened the door. He held a folder with the Forest Service seal laminated on the cover. "Ms. Kepler," he said, voice low, "they'd like you to serve as independent advisor to the Mountain Restoration Program, recommended by several agents." He paused, anxious, as though he expected her to say no. Marin lifted her eyes, met the ranger's gaze. In the tremor of his shoulders, she read conviction more than bureaucracy. One nod was enough. He offered a faint smile, turned, and slipped from the station. The door closed with a soft click. Rain kept its rhythm on the roof. She rose bare feet, whispering across worn boards, and paused at the window. Dawn flickered through the tree line, the forest muted, waiting. Wind carried a promise of change, and she understood the loss she carried wasn't a debt-erasing strength. It was the forge for purpose. Lena's life, her absence, stakes driven deep into resolve, not anchors dragging her under. She drew a breath, damp air brushing her skin, rain pattering steady. Scars marked her body, old, new, each one a threshold between grief and grit. No argument rose, no self-pity, only an acceptance in standing still. She pulled the future closer. Her gaze drifted to the photograph, the stone anchor, the creek story, the forest enduring year after year. Memory was no prison, it was ground. A whistle crackled from the hallway radio. The young ranger returned, tablet in hand. "Federal Command Center just sent reports. Your recording already viral. They're mobilizing for cleanup and prosecution." Marine nodded. The world had seen the mountain not as resource, but as truth. She opened the door. Rain laced the air, and the forest breathed loud, alive. Birds stirred in the pines, distant calls threading the slope. Wind rolled past, trunk stems dripping with possibility. Sound gathered like a river beneath the new sky. Not again, she thought. This time she would stay standing. The cabin no longer stood as an island of rot. Spring had arrived, tentative but insistent, coaxing color from the soil like someone urging a child back into sunlight. Moss blushed green along the stones. A ring of saplings circled the yard pines, aspens won sweet gum roots, freshly set in loosened earth. Twine strung between them held scraps of linen and cotton, old handkerchiefs, prayers stitched in thread. Marin stepped back to take in the roof, shingled with salvaged wood from the ranger station. The porch no longer groaned like bones. Floors scrubbed clean of mildew, cupboards stocked with more than rusted cans and memory. Through the trees drifted a hum of voices. Families had come with trays of food seedlings and clay pots, mason jars of cider. A fire pit sparked in the back. No speeches, no officials. Just hands in the dirt, laughter between fence posts, and a quiet that no longer pressed heavy. By the garden's edge, a girl with tight curls and dirt across her cheek tugged at Marin's sleeve. "Are you still scared of the woods?" she asked, tilting her head. Marin crouched beside her, brushing pine needles from the girl's shoulder. "I used to be," she said, "but I think I was more afraid of the silence." The girl blinked. "Like when nobody talks," Marin nodded, smiling. "Like when you've lost someone and all the words in the world stop making sense." The girl didn't answer. She just slipped her hand into Marin's and held it sticky and warm. They planted a tree together, a slender birch, its bark pale as moonskin. Marin packed soil around the base, hands steady, no gloves. Later, while rinsing her palms at the old hand pump by the cabin, a scratchy radio beside the window crackled to life. A local news voice said, calm and clipped, "Rourke's trial continues this week in Denver. All mineral permits linked to his company have been revoked." The words passed through her like wind, felt but not arresting. Vindication through headlines meant little. What mattered had already been uprooted, reshaped, and replanted. She opened the drawer beneath the windowsill and pulled out a wooden nameplate. Marin Kepler, Ranger. The edges were worn but legible. This time she didn't pin it to her jacket. She carried it to the door and nailed it gently above where anyone passing could read. Not a return to a job, but a claim to a role. A choice. Dusk bled into the trees, softening their outlines. By the fire, someone played a harmonica, while children chased each other through smoke and orange light. One paused beneath a clothesline of prayer ribbons and waved. She raised her hand in answer. The cabin smelled of lemon oil and dry wood. She filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and waited for the whistle. When it came, she poured mint tea and carried the cup to the small table near the window. Two chairs stood there now, one old, one newly repaired. Both faced outward. She placed the steaming mug on the right-hand side, where once she always left a second cup. This time, instead of turning away or waiting for someone who would never come, she pulled out the other chair and sat. One hand curled around the mug, the other pressed flat to the table's grain, as if grounding everything she'd learned to hold. No tears, no declarations. The trees rustled gently. An owl called. Farther off, the river kept speaking to the rocks in its same old voice. She listened and sipped. Some grief stays. It doesn't shrink, it grows into something else. For Marin's survival wasn't about erasing the past, but planting something through it. Sometimes the loudest kind of healing comes from doing quietly what no one expects you to do, staying standing, growing. Let the silence hold space, not as absence, but as invitation. Wherever you are today, may you give yourself permission to begin again, like trees do.